Good afternoon. I'm Howard Duvall. I'm a council member at large for the City of Columbia and chair of this committee. I am joined by Council Member Will Brennan from District 3 and Councilwoman Tina Herbert from District 1 as a committee appointed by the City Council to hear the positions on the short-term rental ordinance. And so we're off and running this afternoon. You will note on the agenda that there is no ordinance discussion today. This is a public hearing to listen to the different sides of the argument on short-term rental regulation, and we will not discuss any particular ordinance this afternoon. We also want to be as brief and succinct as possible, not only because of the weather, but because Mr. Brennan has to leave us at 5 o'clock, and I would like to see if we could get through around that time. So if your point of view has been expressed, please don't feel like you have to come up and speak for 3 minutes to reiterate something that's already been said. I'm going to start the meeting off by calling on two people. Kit Smith has been kind of shepherding the neighborhood side, and David Bergman has been very good working with us sort of as an unofficial, or maybe you've got an official title now, David, but an unofficial representative of the short-term rental people. So we will start off with Kit Smith.
He'll bring your presentation.
Just hit it and it starts. Oh. Okay, so we ready to start? Got me. Thank you. My name is Kit Smith, Mr. Chairman. I'm so glad to be here. Councilmember Herbert, Councilmember Brennan, thank you for your time in this stormy weather. What I'd like to do is just to go over some data with you that I hope will show you why a lot of the Columbia neighborhoods feel like they're the frog being boiled in water or being cooked. And this data comes from a site that is gathered by the STR industry. It's called AirDNA. And on their webpage, they say they are powered by over 10 million global properties on Airbnb and VRBO in 120,000 global markets. They're called Market Minder, and it's the #1 leading platform for short-term rental intelligence. So if you want to open an Airbnb, you go to them, and they help, you pay them, and they provide you with the data to make a decision about whether it's a good deal or not. So, let's begin. This is the concentration that we have in Columbia as of a certain date. Can y'all see it? Oh, okay, good.
We've got a
Now, the numbers change from every time you look at a web page and see it, but just for the sake of today, we'll stick with these numbers that we gathered on a certain day. The thing that stands out here is the concentration. You can see it's widely dispersed, but the only folks who really you're going to hear from are those who live in that congested area in the inner city. That's where most of them are. This is the data that's on the greater Columbia area. It tells you whether it's an entire home or a private room or just a shared room, the rental size. The striking thing here is the 18% quarterly growth over the last 3 years. And that's in the greater Columbia area. Now, I'm not very good at economics, but my husband was at the business school, and I asked him, what does that mean, quarterly growth? And he said it's basically kind of comes out to the same thing annualized. But if you look at that number, you can see that it went from 600 to 1,000 in 3 years. So let's take a closer look at the most impacted zip codes. 29205 is the first one that I selected to discuss with you. It includes the area around 5 Points. It includes Shandon all the way to Rosewood. 232 active rentals out of those 832 are in 29205. A little more detail, the rental growth is 14% a quarter in that zip code. Most of them are independent houses or apartments. Very few of them are what the sharing economy started out to be, which was a shared room or a shared part of a house. That's 29205. 29201, if you take a look, it includes the university on the left-hand side and up into other side of Gervais Street. And on the right-hand side, you'll see Elmwood, Cottontown, a little bit of Earlwood. They have let's see, their number came up to 198 at the certain time that we were taking a look at it. And their growth rate was 10% a quarter, going from 100, in 3 years, it tripled or went over 200 in just 3 years. The interesting thing here, and the reason that I showed you these, is because we can regulate all we want to, and if every STR that came into our neighborhoods was beautifully manicured lawn, well taken care of, always had polite guests, it would still be a problem. Because STRs disrupt the fabric of the community. And the more that we have, the more the fabric of that community is threatened. We can have transient people, and that's fine. But there's a concept in real estate known as the tipping point, and that's the point of no return. These two zip codes are already inundated with student rentals. This compounds our problem of the impact on the affordability of housing and the affordability of long-term rents. A family or a long-term renter cannot compete with a person who is going to buy a home and convert it into a short-term rental or student rental. The price goes up so that it's not affordable. So for every one of these homes that you've seen, these 832, and the half of them are in 05 and 01, and they're growing dramatically. So we need your help. We care the most about the fabric of our community. We appreciate the diversity that we have. We certainly don't mind guests coming in, but when we reach that tipping point, there's no going back. We want neighbors, we want residents, we want people you can go borrow a cup of flour from or bring you a casserole when somebody dies, or you can run over there and say, I've got an emergency, can you watch my kid for me? We know the names of our mailmen or mail carriers. We know the names of our police force that come in and have come into our region. We know each other and we care about each other. And the more transients that you have coming through your neighborhood, the more you disrupt the neighborhood, and it starts a spiral away from home ownership and community into transient neighborhoods, which we do not need in our city. So we need your help. We have discussed this among a lot of us who care, and we understand that the investment has already been made by a lot of these well-meaning people that have seen an opportunity to make money off of short-term rentals. That's fine. But there does come a tipping point, and we feel like that our property values, those of us who live next door to an STR, they'd go up if we sold it as an STR or as a student rental, but you have a hard time selling it to a family. I have a good friend who lived in one of these neighborhoods who adored her neighborhood. She was very active, went to all the meetings, took care of it. She got ready to sell her home because of some health reasons they had to vacate. There was no offer except from people that were going to convert it into either an Airbnb or an STR. That's a problem for our community. It's a housing market aberration that's been caused by this dynamic. I know it's a huge problem, and I think We all want to be fair, but I hope that you'll be fair to us as well and keep in mind our concerns. Thank you,
ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? David?
Thank you. And I only got 3 minutes, I thought, when I came here, so that's what I got prepared. Appreciate Kit speaking about that. I think that, that helps put that side in perspective. I definitely hear those concerns, and I think a lot of us are neighbors too and hear those concerns as well. So, that's what we're here to talk about, and, that's what we want to work through, solutions as well. I just want to point out just really quickly on the data, I think when we look at those big purple boxes, it makes it seem like it's overwhelming the neighborhood, but those are big boxes just meant to show a particular home, and it overlays like an entire block, so it can kind of seem like it's taking over, but we're talking about 1% of the housing stock. This is not moving the market. This is not overrunning these neighborhoods from my perspective. And from what I've seen, if that's truly more than 1%, then, let's talk about does there need to be some other solution, but what are those percentages? I think talking about it in percentages is the way to kind of frame that discussion, rather than just looking at the boxes in the neighborhoods. I think other folks agree. So I just want to say thank you again for bringing this topic to us here today and allowing us to speak. I'm going to go quick so a lot of more people can speak, but I think hosting concerned neighbors alike will benefit from a policy that does bring us more certainty on this issue and can address it in a fair way. I'd also just like to point out that I've spoken with a lot of hosts and cleaners who can't be here today, and it's because of the hurricane and the state of emergency. As hosts, we're being inundated right now with requests from evacuees from Florida and from the South Carolina coastal cities, and that's just because they're looking for refuge in Colombia where they're hoping things won't be as bad, and I hope that's the case. And I've been asked by many of them to just say to you guys, can we have one more meeting so those folks who can't be here because of the circumstances can come out and have their moment to provide comment as well. I think we owe them that. And then I think the gist of what I was going to say here today was just about the underlying problems that we're trying to address, some of which we just heard, and the method by which we're going about solving it. I just have a few concerns, and my first comment is that we still haven't seen the code enforcement data as it relates to STRs. I believe we are tasked with David Hatcher going back and bringing that data to us, and I hope that that's why he's here, is to prepare and present that to us in this meeting, because I think the impetus that we've heard a lot for this is that this is related to code issues and that were problems, and it just feels silly not to have that data to support our understanding prior to making these big decisions. And I just ask the council to conduct the research first on the code violations, and if, the housing, there needs to be housing studies to understand, like, okay, if there's 1% of the city is STRs, is that moving the needle on the home prices? And let's understand that first before we solve. So that's my big ask there, and I think most hosts would agree on that too. And then I think just in terms of the process, again, it just feels a little backwards. We had our first meeting on the topic, and we were introduced to an ordinance that basically bans STRs before we had any conversation or discussion. And we didn't have the code enforcement data, and obviously hosts were really upset by that. And we heard that at the meeting, I think loud and clear, and we'll hear some of that today, I bet. But now we're hearing about a different ordinance that's, again, kind of being drafted behind closed doors. It's been shared now, but why are we drafting solutions before we first understand the underlying issues? And why are we kind of bringing that, why are we not bringing that, that group of impacted areas together to have the discussion first? So we as hosts would just like to ask that the subcommittee put together some sort of working group with those impacted areas. I think that would include people like hosts, city officials and lawyers, neighborhood groups like KIT, and others, other neighborhood board members, hotel and restaurant associations, and any others who have an interest. Let's bring them forward and let's all join together and collaborate on this. And I think there's just a lot of power in us working together as neighbors and as residents and just, back and forth, let's get it done. Those perspectives I think will be really important. And again, just right now, it just feels like it's being dictated to us, and I just want you guys to know that that's how we feel, and I hope that that we can contribute to the process. We understand the industry, we want to help, but we can't do that unless we get that seat at the table with everybody else, and we can hear what they're saying and solve the issue. So we look forward to working with you, and let's get it done. Thank you.
Where's Michael? Michael, you have the microphone.
Thank you very much. Michael Anselmo, resident of Wales Garden, former president of the Wales Garden Neighborhood Association. My family and I live right around the corner from Councilman Brennan on Hayward. 2 points I really want to make. You're going to hear a lot from both sides today. I think there's a lot of balancing we need to do. And one of the main concerns, and I think that could benefit both sides, is the way to use revenue that the city can generate from these short-term rentals to help the city generate more revenue and allow the residents to have some comfort for how this is used. And I'm going to preface my comments by saying I know y'all have some litigation ongoing with Airbnb and the other entities about tax fees and revenue. As an attorney, I've taken a casual look. I'm not offering an opinion. I think y'all are in a pretty good spot to be able to tax these entities. And they operate much like hotels. So to overlay sort of the same tax regime or a similar tax regime that y'all impose on hotel stays for the guests would allow the city to generate additional revenue in addition to the license fee revenues that need to be generated from these entities. What that allow the city to do is use that revenue however you want. My suggestion is to enhance your code enforcement departments. We've come to y'all many times about issues with long-term rentals and now some short-term rental issues. And with code enforcement, it would show the neighborhoods that we have an outlet to go to make sure that the situations you're going to hear about are regulated properly, points are enforced correctly, and the city is helping us manage the situation in our neighborhoods. I think that's a beneficial thing. Obviously, it's going to take a little while to play out in the courts. I understand that. But I ask you to please keep that in mind as you potentially craft legislation moving forward. And then my last point is something that I don't think anybody else will mention. If you look at the historical overlay situation that the city has passed in neighborhoods like Wales Garden and voluntarily imposed on ourselves, one of the things that the city has told us in these ordinances, in your description of the ordinances, in the materials on the website, is the purpose of the overlay is to preserve the historic single-family character of the neighborhoods. I think that's somehow getting lost a little bit in what the city mandates on homeowners through the overlay, and then the short-term rentals that change that characteristic because those are no longer single-family residences. So it's balancing. You have a lot of things to balance, but the revenue generated from these entities can be beneficial, but you do have to keep in mind that you have specific statutory mandates elsewhere in your code that require you to preserve our historic neighborhoods. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
Kelsey Kennedy.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. My name's Kelsey. I'm a real estate agent, a business owner, a community member, a mom, and an investor. Before I started my business, I was on food stamps, and I could barely pay my mortgage. I couldn't afford daycare, but I couldn't afford to work. My business now allows me more time at home with my daughter, more financial freedom, and an opportunity to allow others to enjoy this beautiful historic city that I call home. The word investor, I think, has a negative view in a lot of people's eyes here. You hear that word and you think of large corporations, but the short-term rental community is made up of a very small group of people who are just like you, good people who want our communities to thrive. A lot of people ask, who would want to come to Colombia And the data shows very clearly that there is a need for short-term rentals here. It's the kind of city that brings large families from everywhere to watch their loved ones graduate from USC or Fort Jackson. It provides for a more convenient way to travel with children or those with disabilities. The way of travel is changing. Short-term rentals are a new age for convenience, hospitality, experience, adventure, and entrepreneurship. And to propose such harsh regulations against our business is not fixing the problem that many of you think that we are. The problem of a few bad long-term and short-term investors whose character shows in their rentals should not punish those who are doing good work. I hope that if you take anything away from listening to everyone speak here today, it's that a large group of people here today are proof of hardworking people and business owners who are not the problem that you are facing. I hope that y'all are able to draft regulations that are fair and just so that we can continue to do what we love and bring more people to this beautiful city and just to provide more business for our small business owners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelsey. Susan Cohen.
Time limit's not going to let me use all these pages, is it? Three quick things, just listening to the few people you've heard so far, and that is, we are not against short-term rentals. I represent, for those who don't know, the South Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association. So while my overall goal is to represent and promote the traditional lodging industry, we have members who are short-term rental owners, management, et cetera. But we have seen across the country that well-meaning, unregulated short-term rental situations have quickly gotten out of hand. So that is our kind of cautionary tale. How do we work together, as someone said earlier, to make this work for everybody? And there's kind of really three bottom lines: limit them, license them, and level the playing field. I sympathize with people who say this is letting me earn more money, this is helping me stay home. Nobody's trying to fight that. But when it comes to the location of those businesses, they are in fact a business, and they need to be in a commercial area and not in your residential zoning that you've already established on your own website and with your zoning. The second part of it is licensing. One of our overriding goals has been we need to know where they are, we need to know who they are. We know that a lot of people have in fact been bad actors, and that's maybe part of the problem, is trying to overcome that. Again, it might not have yet been that here in Columbia, but it has been that and is growing across the country. This is a topic that we are looking at as a priority in our national lodging association. So I'm not pulling these things out of air. It has been proven that once they start happening in other communities, we all have to start watching because they have spread. The leveling of the playing field is kind of, again, what someone mentioned: the taxation, the fees, the inspections, the safety factor. We know that this industry has changed, and it was initially a great added value of coming and experiencing a community, that sharing economy, and that was how people promoted it. It was a warm feeling. Again, the statistics show more and more that as a community allows it to grow unregulated and unlimited, that investors, and the big investors, not the small ones, companies, investment firms, even international, are in fact using this to start de facto hotels. I beat. But thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it. Jim Ray.
My name is Jim Ray, and I own a short-term rental, and I just want to make a few comments about the regulations. I'm for regulations, but they've got to be fair. If you overregulate the short-term rental industry or any industry, you're asking for a black market to be created. And it will happen if this overregulation is passed. For instance, it says an owner can only rent his property 180 days. Can you tell the hotel industry or the long-term rental industry they can only rent their property 50% of the time? It's got to be a level playing field. So the regulations where basically 3 strikes that you're out, that should be regulated the same way, in my opinion, as the long-term rental or the hotel business. If someone breaks the law at a hotel, that person's the one that gets in trouble. The hotel doesn't get closed down after 3 violations. Same thing in a long-term rental. So that shouldn't be part of the regulations, in my opinion. Capping the number of short-term rentals, it's just not a good idea. You're capping the economic growth of Colombia. And in my opinion, that's just a very, very, very bad idea. So, and that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Jim. I think David is double dipping. I see Wendy Bergman here.
My name's Wendy Bergman. I have lived and worked in the city of Columbia for 10 years, and I'm a proud resident of Cottontown for the past 7. As a licensed architect, my family and I have a deep appreciation for historic architecture and good design. My husband and I, David, have always had an interest in real estate, and we're fortunate enough to purchase an investment property in Earlwood. We poured our blood, sweat, and tears into an extensive renovation of a really dilapidated 1919 home that was formerly a rental and brought it back to its former glory. It was a passion project. It was during this time that we experienced the loss of our first child, a son at 23 weeks. The loss of our son and the complications leading up to that created immense instability in our lives. That experience made us want to become more financially independent and take control of our lives and what matters. We hosted our first STR guest in Earlwood shortly after, and we worked hard and we hustled and we learned a lot that first year about what it meant. Since then, we were approached by other local STR owners and asked to manage their homes. Some of those people were neighbors. We provide the same quality and comfort that we became known for with our first rental. Being an STR host or manager is not an easy job. We are held to very high standards, and we can't defer maintenance like a long-term rental or a typical homeowner can. We have an established network of cleaners, carpenters, painters, plumbers, electricians, roofers, landscapers, pest control services, and supply houses that have grown with us as well. As residents and neighbors, our dollars we make go right back into our local economy. We not only provide the opportunity for our guests to shop local and dine local, but for them to stay locally too. Countless guests have told me how much they love the area, that they plan to return in the future. Some are considering moving into the community, and after staying at our home, that helped them solidify their decision. Many are here for work for a few days, and then they return home for the weekends. We regularly host construction crews, business groups, and staying with us helps them save on housing and therefore build their businesses too. We house USC professors, and they travel to Columbia for classes during the week or the semester to teach. We have families that stay with us while a loved one is in the hospital or on hospice. Our neighbors rent our homes for extended family during a separation, a staycation, or simply while work is being undone on their homes. We are currently housing Hurricane Ian evacuees and providing them a sense of comfort during a time of immense distress. We are helping people, and they are helping our community too. We are all here today because we care about the city of Columbia, and we believe that there is value here. It is important that we collaborate between all sides of this issue and find a solution that fits our unique needs here as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Let's see. The last name starts with B-E. Bowers? Your own.
Thank you for letting me speak. Gustavo Bueno. I'm actually a resident in the Elmwood Park. So my wife and I moved there about 2 years ago. There was a house sitting in the market for almost 2 years. For almost 6 months. And it was falling apart. It had 4 tenants in it. And we saw as an opportunity to bring that house back to life because it was really in bad shape. Still is. We're working on it. It's a very long work in progress. And like many other houses in their neighborhood, is not in good shape. And I've seen a lot of the STR people doing a lot of good work in maintaining the houses, and I'm doing that myself. I have an Airbnb in one of the units because that really helps us to speed up the renovation process. The overall rent in the neighborhood in those older houses is relatively low, so it's not really a good investment for landlords that are doing long-term because it just don't pay the bills. The numbers really don't make sense. So I'm for some regulation as long as it's based on science and numbers. Just showing a number without a context, it doesn't really give us the right picture. So I think if we sit down with the right data and right information and make an educated decision, we can come up with an agreement where everybody's as close as to happy as you possibly can. I don't want to see all my neighbors becoming an STR. I live there, and I don't think that's going to be a positive impact for the neighborhood, but betting it all together is not good for the neighborhood. It's not good for the citizens of Colombia overall because you're bringing less revenue. We house nurses, families from the Fort Jackson for graduation. Even our neighbors come to our place every now and then because they're having issues with their own house. So I think there's an opportunity to make everybody happy if we work with the right data. Data without context is just not useful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jesse Stevenson.
Hello, my name is Jesse Stevenson. I'm a real estate broker, property manager, and investor. A lot of good points have been made. I guess a couple small ones I'd like to make is I don't think Colombia is a traditional tourist town. I think we have people that come for Fort Jackson and USC and things like that, but I don't foresee this ever becoming a town where like the whole neighborhoods are STRs because the law of supply and demand won't, there's just not that many people that are coming to Colombia just for vacation purposes, you know what I mean? So but I do think regulation's good. And also the argument about, well, they should be in a commercially zoned area. The difference between a long-term rental and a short-term rental is just a definition, 31 days versus less than 30 days. But long-term rentals are not required to be in a commercially zoned area, and some streets are full of nothing but long-term rentals. So I think that argument is not a very fair argument when we could easily just turn them into long-term rentals, and it's still a business in a residential neighborhood, in my opinion. The only difference is one person's there for 31 days and one person's there for 5 or 6. But yes, when you do the, if y'all do go forward with the regulation and the permits, I don't see why they would, want to make them non-transferable. Like if someone did a great job turning a house into an attractive STR, I don't know why they can't sell that to another operator, down the road. Why does it have to all of a sudden become, a single, I don't understand that stipulation in there. And also, I would hate to see, one of the recommendations was that permits would be issued like one time, and which is basically like a grandfather clause, and then as every person either decides to sell the house because they don't want to do it anymore, or loses it because of a violation, there's no new permits. I mean, to me, that's just a backhanded way of eventually getting rid of all of them, because eventually there'll be a lot, I mean, that's just a way of ending it without saying we're trying to end it. So I think you should always be able to have, new permits issued in the future, not just a one-time, thing, because I just don't think that's fair. And like I do believe there's only about maybe 1% of the houses in the Columbia market are STRs. And so I don't think it's as big of a problem as people think.
Thank you. Matt Carroll.
Hey there. Thank you all for having me and for being here. I think the underlying question about all of this whole conversation is, who do we want to be as a city? And what is the issue that we're trying to correct? Are we going to be a city that has open arms to guests and meets them where they are and what they want? Or are we going to be a city that's more closed-doored and more closed for business? And I think that's the underlying question here. I think the issue that is being addressed is focused on short-term rentals, but I think it's an overall rental issue. The long-term rental ordinance has been in place for a long time. That's been a thing. But is that accomplishing what it needs to accomplish for the long-term rentals? And are we trying to fix a problem that we don't even really know exists for short-term rentals that may also be grouping the long-term rentals into that problem? I don't think that 232 houses or 832 houses, depending on what area you're talking about, creates a problem that's a citywide nuisance in a city of, 50,000 houses. So I think we have to ask the question, is this really a big enough problem specifically to short-term rentals that we need to be going through all of these discussions? And so just a few points to make. One of the slides that were shown earlier showed the 18% increase in number of short-term rentals. I think the other way to look at that is demand has increased, obviously, right? Because if demand isn't increasing, supply wouldn't be increasing. We wouldn't be going out and having more short-term rentals if people didn't want them, right? And so clearly the people that are coming to our city want these. And so are we going to be able to continue to provide them for our guests, or are we not? I think that's one of the big questions. It's been said, hurricane refugees are in our short-term rentals right now this weekend. That also includes the linemen. We talked to one of the hoteliers earlier today. He said he's got 100 rooms right now for Dominion Energy. We also have people that are staying in our places that are waiting to get down to Florida or Georgia or wherever they're assigned to go to. So there's a lot of reasons why these exist and why they're necessary. I also think it's worth considering. We've been talking about tax revenue and taxing these. I think everyone is in favor of some sort of regulation and taxing these, but I think you also have to consider the revenue around them. I think all of us are very local, and I have coupons in mind for local restaurants. I have the menus for the local restaurants, and so all of my guests know that these are the places to go to when they stay. So it's not just the revenue from specifically direct revenue from the short-term rentals, but it's also the revenue that's generated by the businesses around them that may not have a hotel or another option very close to them to stay. And just the last point that I would say is I don't know that these regulations will fix the overall issue. If I have short-term rentals, I also have long-term rentals. If short-term rentals are banned effectively, my short-term rentals will just become long-term rentals and be college rentals. So the issue still remains. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. If you live at 2534 Wheat Street, you have just won the lottery.
Good afternoon. Dennis Wheel, 2534 Wheat Street. Most of the topics that I was going to talk about have already been addressed. I do serve on the Shandon Neighborhood Council. The only item I would bring up then is that whatever regulations come out of this, that the strong distinction between owner-occupied and non-owner-occupied is maintained. I think that distinction is important for some of the other issues that were brought up today, that people want to use their own home for short-term rental, or people want to make sure that there's neighbors living in the home and still use it as a short-term rental. So keeping that distinction, I think, would help some of those issues. That's it.
Thank you. Last name is Harris. First name Noel.
How y'all doing? I love Airbnbs. There's no secret to that. You'll probably remember me from the last meeting, the energy. I truly believe it changed myself and my family's life, our memories, and it's not about the money for us. I have a son with autism. We can't travel. We can't visit family, friends, do travel sports for my 8-year-old because my 7-year-old is diagnosed with autism. We discovered Airbnb as a guest before a host, and I said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, we have a bedroom for our 7-year-old. He can go to sleep with headphones on. There's not a lot of noises like we have at hotels. Let's bring this home. My wife and I own a small company. We're residential redevelopers, real estate investors. We've flipped, rented, Airbnb'd right around 100 properties here in Colombia, Lexington, and some of the zip codes we're talking about here today. And we like to be able to do that for other people too. And so one of our crown jewel properties right across the street from Finley Park, and for the longest time it was boarded up, neglected. You'd sit in the middle of the park, look up, and you'd see this ugly, scary-looking house. It's right next to the cemetery, so it like went really well, like Halloween parties or whatever, I'm sure. But we renovated it. We put over $100,000 into that property. And when we bought it, there was drug paraphernalia, all that stuff. You know, people squatting and getting into trouble there. And imagine coming into Colombia, and that's like the first thing that you see, right in Finley Park. And I can go on and on with all the other neighborhoods. Every single house that we've bought to Airbnb was run down. I've never looked at myself as a competitor to someone who's buying a residential house. In fact, I look at myself as someone who helps people who want to buy a home for themselves. Just recently, we sold a home in Melrose Heights 3 weeks ago. We had it as an Airbnb for almost 2 years. We renovated it, we fixed it up, we made it beautiful. We were able to pay the bills, make a little bit of money along the way. But then we sold it to a first-time home buyer that wanted to be in that neighborhood. So I think it's also important that to understand from the investing standpoint, this is like, I don't buy a house and say this is going to be an Airbnb. Airbnb is just a platform that allows us to have options when we're trying to figure out what to do with the property, time the market, and things like that. So for us, lots of this stuff is temporary as well. I would love it if every 2 years we'd acquire an Airbnb property, and then after that we would sell it and someone could enjoy it. So it's crazy. Like, I moved here 10 years ago from Fort Myers, Florida, and I'm a little rattled because everyone down south, their homes were destroyed, their businesses and livelihoods were gone. They're coming up here, my family, once the storm clears here, to stay in our houses. But I tell you what, like 29201, I wouldn't have lived there 10 years ago. Like, with my kids and everything, like driving through, and you look at all the dots on the maps of where the Airbnbs are, and it's like, oh, those neighborhoods are nice because of people like us and what we're doing, fixing them up. So the end game isn't to always have it as an Airbnb and like this is going to be a hotel in your neighborhood. It's just an option, and it's a nice option to have for people like us and for people that want to come and visit this great city of Columbia. And I know you're in line with the autism and trying to do all this great stuff for kids like my son, adventure and all this stuff. I'm telling you, if you take that away, that's going to stop too. People are going to stop. People are coming here. Jesse, they are coming here to vacation because they have special needs because of this option. So just please keep that in mind when you're figuring everything out. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Is that K.M. Williams?
Appreciate y'all very much for having me. I'm Tim Williams, the owner and broker in charge of 803 Realty. I think STR has gotten a very negative picture painted for it. I think that the narrative needs to be changed. We're all real estate investors. If you own your home, you are a real estate investor. You're investing in your home, you're investing in your community. And like Noah just said, we're doing the same thing. One common misconception is that we get a lot of party folks coming into these short-term rental homes. The good thing about being in a short-term rental had that if that happens, you've got a nuisance guest, we can immediately remove those guests. If you have a long-term rental and you have a nuisance tenant, with landlord-tenant laws, it could take 30, 45, sometimes even 60 days to remove those tenants. So that's a huge advantage of having short-term rentals in your neighborhood if you're concerned about that. Two is short-term rental game is very competitive. So we've had to pivot. We have to keep our properties to very high-level standards. Guests do not choose to come and stay in subpar short-term rentals. It's even the pricing, everything about short-term rental is competitive. So homeowners, the property owners, keep their property maintained very highly, normally. So in turn, it's going to up the property values in the neighborhood. As far as being able to dictate how you sell a home to, or whoever comes in to put an offer on a home, like Ms. Kitt said that her friend needed to sell their house for medical reasons, and the only offer she got was for somebody that was going to use it as a short-term rental. I've been in real estate for a very long time. I'm sure some of the other realtors here would agree with me that we don't particularly advertise that this house is a short-term rental. It is somebody sees the value in the space and that they can capture a nice income using short-term rental. Also on the list side, we don't ask the other side. We're very limited as to what we can ask as to what they're going to use this space for. And I don't think that we could dictate how somebody were to purchase their home. So to only think that you could dictate the sale of property to an individual family, I think that's a reach. I think it's a stretch. Leveling the playing field as far as tax income, very common knowledge that secondary home taxes at 6%, huge gap in 4% to 6%. So the city is definitely getting a tremendous amount of revenue just off the higher tax rate for secondary homes. I too am, and I'm all for regulation, permitting, inspection. It is small business. I think limiting small business is what is driving the growth of your city. The growth chart shows that the city is growing because of the positive impact that you guys are doing in being able to open a small business. I'm from Lexington County. The city of Lexington, it's very difficult and expensive to opening a small business. In city of Columbia, it's not as difficult and it's much less expensive. The growth chart is positive. The growth of the city is positive. That is why you're experiencing and getting more short-term rentals. I'm a father of 4 children. It is almost impossible for me, I have 2 teenagers and 2 small children, to find a hotel room large enough to accommodate 6 people when I go. Even though I love the hotel industry, they've supported me in other ventures. I know my time is up, but do consider that it allows larger families to be together when visiting the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, is that bedding? Is Sarah going to let you have her time too?
How you doing? Just want a couple things based on what I didn't catch her name. The lady who spoke first said. She talked a lot about the fabric of the neighborhood, and I think a lot of negative things get done in the name of fabric of the neighborhood. That has a terrible history. If you look at it, we've done a lot of. If you look at redlining of neighborhoods, and a lot of really bad stuff has been done. So if we're going to make any rules or regulations, please don't do them because of fabric of the neighborhood reasons. They're just, has a terrible, terrible history behind it. The second thing, she talked about tipping point. I mean, that you're reaching a tipping point with the houses. Anyone who's run the numbers on a short-term rental, it's supply and demand. The occupancy rates on these houses are going down, which means we're not going to keep growing at the rate we're growing. We are reaching a tipping point. You're not going to see 10, 15, 20, 30% of houses being short-term rentals because it just won't support that. It's just the math doesn't work. So there's going to be a natural cap just based on supply and demand on a math on it. And all we're going to be stuck with is all these nicely done, nicely fixed up homes that now get sold off and turned into either long-term rentals or get turned into a nice new home for someone to buy. So there's no downside to that side. So I think I just asked you, don't do it for fabric of the neighborhood reasons, and the tipping point works both ways. So thank you guys, I appreciate what you're doing.
Are you going to let Sarah speak?
I think she did have a couple
Okay.
points. I didn't use my whole time, but she can have whatever's left.
Thank you so much for your time. time. I appreciate it. My name is Sarah. I am 100% for STRs and with regulation. I think just 2 points I wanted to add to the many great points that anybody who's been for STRs have made so far is that I just want to say that most hosts are not malicious, and I really hope that you guys remember that. They work very hard, as I believe one of the ladies said before in the beginning, we work very hard to make a business not only profitable, but we do care about the neighborhood quite a bit. And I don't think anybody is going into it to change or disrupt anything. They really are trying to add to it. And I think if you know anything about hosts, we are 100% okay with regulation as long as it's fair and honest and everyone's coming to the table with good motives. And the only thing I ask going forward is, I'm a little worried going forward through this process, having seen other cities go through this, that there's a lot of feelings and thinking about things, and there's not a lot of data and facts that are used when they're making the regulations. So I just request that we don't kind of worry about, the big purple dots on the thing. We actually get real hard data as far as what is actually happening, and then make decisions based off of that, and have both sides have an equal say. That's all I ask. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. Kate? Is that Gully?
I want to start by saying thank you for the time and for listening to all the different perspectives that have been offered both here and at other meetings. My name is Kate Cully. I am the housekeeping manager and operations manager for Heartwood Furnished Homes. Been with them a little over 2 years. And I want to give you a little picture into a perspective that perhaps you haven't heard yet, and that's of what I consider kind of the little fish in this big pond. That's our cleaners and our maintenance staff and our support staff. I hear a lot about hosts and owners and investors, and in my perspective, these little people that are just trying to make a living, they're the real investors in the short-term rental industry. We currently at Heartwood have 25 cleaners. They come from a range of different backgrounds. Some are subcontractors, some are now hourly employees. We've afforded ourselves the effort and the ability to offer 401k and medical benefits now to employees. Our cleaners are mostly single moms. As for myself, my husband left. I have 2 sons. Overnight, I needed a job and a way to support my kids. Short-term rental industry gave me that. It gave me financial value. It gave me self-esteem that I lacked. Heartwood gave me a step up when I really needed the help. We have cleaners that were teachers during COVID. COVID killed their job. They needed work. One of our best cleaning teams is a former teacher and a disabled combat veteran who is a Marine. They are our best team. They now have their own home listed as a short-term rental property with Heartwood and are very happy with the cycle that they're involved in. We also have several cleaners that are nurse students, and this job affords them the ability to earn a decent wage, very decent, and also have the time to study and spend time with families, where if they worked a strict 40-hour position, they might not have that ability. I encourage you to consider these little people that live within Colombia. I myself don't live in Colombia, but I cannot express the flutter of pride that I receive when I come over the bridge every morning into work and I see the city skyline. I never imagined that for myself. I truly love the city. We take great pride in the homes we work in, the historic communities that we work in. We work very hard to preserve the integrity of these places. Often, we're in a home 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week. We're watching the height of the grass. We're watching for trash overflow. We're making sure that these homes are safe for our guests. We're constantly reporting any maintenance issues, little things, air filters, smoke detector batteries. We want our guests safe and happy. And as someone else mentioned, our guests are not low maintenance. They let us know about every little thing. I've lived in long-term rentals. I've had slumlords, and we don't have that ability. So please just consider that little bit of perspective. I thank you very much for your time. I would just like to say I'd like for Colombia to be a model of a collaborative effort. I think a lot of shutdown has happened elsewhere, and I would be very proud to say Colombia started this community effort to keep everybody happy. Thank you very much.
Kate, that might be the best quote of the meeting. Hart Trailer. We've got another duet here.
Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak. I was born and raised in the city. I went to Carolina. That's where I met my wife. We call Columbia home. We're raising 3 boys here. We love this city and we want to see it thrive and flourish. I've been working in residential real estate since 2009. So I work and interact daily with various people in the real estate world, buyers, sellers, other agents, attorneys, inspectors, so on. And in my experience and from my conversations with those in the real estate world, the majority of the buyers that we're working with and we're seeing come to our city are people looking to achieve the real estate dream or the American dream of purchasing real estate, owning a home that they can occupy. We're not seeing major corporations and big investment groups swooping in and buying up all the houses and turning all of our neighborhoods into short-term rentals. Second, I work with a number of investors. They're not the big corporations, but they're average Joes like you and me, and they've bought properties to use as short-term rentals. And in all those instances, they bought properties that were in disrepair. They came in, they fixed them up, they made them beautiful. Of course, they made their property's value increase, but they also increased all their neighbors' value. But not only do they increase the value in that way, but with short-term rentals, because of the more regular turnover, there's reason to be getting into the properties more regularly, and there's more opportunities to maintain them, to fix them, to have them nice for the next guest, versus the long-term renters who are in there for a year, and the property managers can't get into those properties, or they have to dance around their schedules to get in. So short-term rentals add value to our neighborhoods. As I said at the start, I love this city. I want to see it thrive and flourish. My generation and the next generation has clearly shown we like Airbnbs. We would much rather stay in an Airbnb than a hotel. The current proposal will eliminate short-term rentals in our city. But thankfully that hasn't passed. And so I think you guys have an opportunity to decide, how are we going to embrace short-term rentals? Are we going to let one bad apple over here taint our view? Are we going to believe inaccurate depictions and unfounded fears? We're going to believe those and then therefore reject short-term rentals and miss out on an opportunity that could better our city? Or are we going to wisely approach this and make fair and just and smart regulations that benefit everyone, but also that would benefit our city? Thank you.
And now for the better half, Vanessa.
Really, most everything I was going to say has already been said, so I'll just say that this is just a legitimate need in a healthy housing market, and so we have to have some level of short-term rentals, and most of the people here are providing excellent options for people, and so I would, on a real estate side, I just feel as if right now the way it's drafted is that owner-occupied properties really need to have more freedom, almost complete freedom. They're living there, they're using their home how they wish, and it's their primary residence. So they should be pretty much exempt from most of what's in there. I would also say when it comes to the 6%, they also need some flexibility. They're already paying extremely high taxes. So the pricing, the financial side is, some of it was extremely high. And so I would just say anything we can do to try to make Columbia a more friendly place to invest. I personally am looking for my first actual investment property. We don't have any yet. And I'm actually not, I want to invest here, but it's really expensive. I'd rather go to North Carolina. I'd rather look at Georgia. It's hard to invest here just with the way it's set up. And I would love nothing more than to be able to do that in Columbia, South Carolina. So I would just really take that into account. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. Catherine Bruce Fleming Bruce, excuse me.
I'm just going to make 3 points. The first point is I hope you will look at how each residential area is in reality. Some blocks are very different from other blocks. The block I live in has a lot of institutional commercial interest in it and very little residential. So how to have the language so that you can kind of accommodate, okay, well, this is in the heart of a neighborhood, this is kind of on the outskirts, maybe it will create less agitation. So that's one point. A second point is that y'all are doing a great job on this conversation. Some of the meetings that I went to of STR leaders didn't have a lot of people in the room look like me. And I'm not a STR owner. One day I might like to do that. So if we create language that's going to kind of cut off people who can get in to the SDR business, I'd hate to see that. You know, I'd like to see diversity in the population of people who are doing that. The third point is that people who own these homes are able to create some kind of revenue stream for themselves, either from a long-term, short-term, whatever, addresses the wealth gap. So we want to have an opportunity for the racial wealth gap to be addressed. So if we can put all those things in to the conversation that says we want to make sure our neighborhoods retain peaceful enjoyment, and we want to make sure that we're able to provide some host opportunities for visitors to come in. So if we can add those 3 points to your consideration, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Emily Bryan.
I am a resident of the Rosewood neighborhood. I moved there about a year ago. I love where I am. I have neighbors that I communicate with when we see something strange. A dog is missing. We text each other, call each other, go next door and say, is this your dog? One night I was walking into my backyard at about 9 o'clock at night, and there was a strange man across the street drinking a beer, sitting out on the sidewalk. And, or there's no sidewalk there, the drainage ditch. And so I communicated with my neighbors who have children, and I said, hey, I just want you to know there's a guy around the corner. And they said, well, you know, call it in. And I called it in, and before I could say, there's a tall man in a hat with a blue shirt on, the police said, is it a tall man in a hat with a blue shirt on? So clearly I wasn't the first person that had called. When I spoke with my neighbor the next day, they said, yes, drug dealers rent out these houses here, the Airbnbs, and use it, and then they leave. And I don't know, you know, what her knowledge of it was. They've lived there for a decade or so. I just want it regulated. I have dogs. I love to go out of town and stay in an Airbnb because it's so much easier than being in a hotel or a different type of place. I would just like it regulated so that it's a safe place to be.
Thank you. And last but not least, Rick. You didn't sign up.
Good evening. Rick Lackland, Director of Sales and Marketing of the Doubletree Conference Center here in Columbia. Also on the Board of Directors for Lake Murray Country Tourism to Columbia, South Carolina. We work very hard to bring tourism to Columbia. So I think I disagree with someone who said that Columbia is not a destination. Lake Murray is alive and well, and we're getting ready to host World Bass Fishing, 25 countries coming into Columbia. So I think that if we talk to South Carolina Parks and Rec, they would disagree as well. If you need a place to stay, I've got 5 presidential suites, 33 junior suites. 33 junior suites, they can house probably about eight people, so come see us. My point is, I think that we're losing focus here. We've heard some very heartwarming stories, and my compassion goes out to each and every one of those. The folks that are, you know, were impoverished and now they see light. I think that's great. What we're talking about here, though, is the occupancy tax. I have an owner that I report to, a single man that owns our hotel, and he has to pay taxes, and there's guidelines and regulations. So that's all we're trying to find here is taxes. We pay 13% occupancy tax. What does that tax go for? That goes to help build our roads, our parks, refurbish all of that. We're asking for an equal playing field here. Recently, as yesterday, you could see on the front page of the paper, hotel to be built in Colombia. About a month ago, there was another hotel that wanted to go in down by the Girl Scouts, if you remember that, right down there off of Gervais Street. Those hotels, represent an owner, and they have to follow the guidelines and regulations that the City Council and the state of South Carolina set forth. So I think today is all we're asking for is an occupancy tax that would put everyone on an equal playing field and would also refurbish our city and help everyone in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Council members, I'm Jim Daniel. I'm president of the Wheeler Hill Neighborhood Association. I sent y'all something earlier. Let me just hit the highlights. Wheeler Hill has one short-term rental. It's owned by LLC. The registered agent is an LLC. The agency that handles the rental is an LLC. The cleaning agent, the person who is our local contact is a cleaning agency without any authority. We were able to track down the owner. They live in Silicon Valley in California. We've talked to the owner, been able to work out an agreement with him that he's going to limit the number of cars. A couple of quick things. Charleston, and I think I sent you the story, spent 2 years on this subject, granted a whole different animal down there, and they ended up, I think, with 3 different sectors for short-term rentals. The Department of Revenue just sent out something last week that basically says that people renting rooms must have a retail license and electronically file and pay accommodation taxes just as hotels do effective October 1st. There was an editorial in the Post and Courier, I think on Sunday, where the comment was made, well, if they have to now record this with the Department of Revenue, why doesn't the Department of Revenue share this with the city so they have the same information so you can do what you need to do? One other issue is the issues we've had at our short-term rental. The city zoning doesn't work on the weekends. Who do you call? You call the police? Well, they don't know anything about parking by permit in Wheeler Hill. They have to show up and it actually has to be an issue. So we've got that issue. There's nobody in the city zoning structure that's available on the weekends would deal with the issues. But on another thing, from a legal standpoint, there's emerging law around the country that says the renting of short-term rentals in a residential neighborhood is a commercial establishment and is a zoning violation. That hadn't gotten here yet, but it's something that's surfacing and will probably appear sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Final comment. We do need to have registration, and we have registration. We need names of the people who are the owners, not a LLC in Timbuktu. We need somebody that we can get in touch with here to address the issue with. Thank you.
John.
Good afternoon. My name is John Wilkinson, and I'm the president of the Elmwood Park Neighborhood Association. I'd like to share a statement on behalf of our board and our 170 active members, a couple of whom are here today. We would like to start by thanking City Council and this committee for taking up this challenging topic. We often hear this refrain that Columbia is behind the times, and on this issue we actually are, as most of the cities we admire have already taken some form of action on short-term rentals. We have the opportunity to learn from other cities and to apply emerging best practices based on what has worked. We also have seen the consequences of inaction. In the first hearing, the benefits for tourists and travelers were made very clear. But what of the benefits for our actual residents who have built these wonderful residential neighborhoods that tourists now want to visit? Elmwood Park is one of the closest residentially zoned neighborhoods to downtown Columbia, where we know there's a concentration. We have a thriving front porch culture and a strong sense of community. Our neighbors look out for one another, especially given some of the challenges we face as a downtown neighborhood. This sense of community and security is critical, and it is built upon relationships among long-term residents who know each other. Our neighbors have expressed serious and legitimate concerns about the proliferation of short-term rentals in Elmwood Park and the impacts on safety and quality of life. There is some tipping point where that sense of security and community starts to get lost and spirals downward. We cannot let it get that far. Our neighbors have invested vastly more in building this neighborhood than any STR investors. That being said, our neighbors also recognize the benefits of short-term rentals for our community. Our neighbors have used short-term rentals to welcome family and friends for extended stays and to seek alternative accommodations during home renovations or repairs. We have a diverse community, and we enjoy welcoming new neighbors and meeting visitors. We have several STR investors in Elmwood Park, and they contribute as much to our neighborhood as individuals as any other neighbor. We recognize that these are our friends and our neighbors running these businesses. We are not a not-in-my-backyard neighborhood. We are seeking outcomes that benefit and protect our residents and homeowners. Our neighborhood supported the city's business-friendly initiatives because we want the benefits of economic growth around our neighborhood. Let's not lose sight of neighborhood-friendly initiatives on this topic, though. Two of the key takeaways we heard from the first hearing were, don't hurt the STR operators and investors, and two, regulation that helps eliminate bad actors is welcome. We would like to express our strong support for regulation that not only eliminates bad actors, but protects our communities where we live. As residents, we don't have the benefit of easily moving to the next neighborhood at the end of a 3-night stay. These are our homes, where life happens, where we raise our children, where we start careers, and where we grow old. When City Council approves this ordinance in its eventual form, we expect that it will also be backed by the resources to actually and swiftly enforce it. The cities we admire have already done this. Let's get it done in Columbia and get on with building the city we love.
Thank you, John. Mr. Brennan, do you have anything to add?
Thank you so much for everybody that came out to the second of 3. Look forward to moving towards the third meeting, and the recommendation of let's have a conversation amongst all of us is something we will follow up on. Very, very engaging conversations. Hopefully we'll come back with something that works for everybody. So thanks again for your time today, and look forward to seeing y'all soon.
I also want to thank everyone for coming out. We have to have open, what do they call them, courageous conversations. And so as the City of Columbia, as we take on new issues, we have to have the conversations and look at and really balance the needs of everyone. So I'm looking forward to furthering the conversation with my fellow council members as well as with you all. Oh, and if you have sent me an email, yes, I did receive it. But no, thank you all for your passion about the subject too, because we need to hear what your thoughts and positions are. Thanks.
And I too want to thank you for your attendance today and for the good comments that you have constructively made to the committee. I can assure you that we want to produce an ordinance that is both fair to the industry and fair to the neighborhoods and will benefit the city of Columbia. And we will be working with members of your industry and with other people that are interested in this topic to see if we can't come up with something that is a well-balanced ordinance. Thank you for coming. Without objection, we will adjourn.